Chapter 1 of The People of the Crater. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Phil Chenevert. This story was first published in Fantasy Book, Volume 1, 1947. The People of the Crater by Andre Norton. Chapter 1. Through the Blue Haze. 6 months and 3 days after the Peace of Shanghai was signed, and the Great War of 1965 to 1970 declared at an end by an exhausted world, a young man huddled on a park bench in New York, staring miserably at the gravel beneath his badly worn shoes. He had been trained to fill the pilot's seat in the control cabin of a fighting plane, and for nothing else. The search for a niche in civilian life had cost him both health and ambition. A newcomer dropped down on the other end of the bench. The flyer studied him bitterly. He had decent shoes, a warm coat, and that air of satisfaction with the world which is a result of economic security. Although he was well into middle age, the man had a compact grace of movement and an air of alertness. "Aren't you Captain Garin Featherstone?" Startled, the flyer nodded dumbly. From a plump billfold, the man drew a clipping and waved it toward his seatmate. 2 years before, Captain Garin Featherstone of the United Democratic Forces had led a perilous bombing raid into the wilds of Siberia to wipe out the vast expeditionary army secretly gathering there. It had been a spectacular affair, and had brought the survivors some fleeting fame. "You're the sort of chap I've been looking for." The stranger folded the clipping again. "A flyer with courage, initiative, and brains. The man who led that raid is worth investing in." "What's the proposition?" asked Featherstone wearily. He no longer believed in luck. "I'm Gregory Farson," the other returned, as if that should answer the question. "The Antarctic man." "Just so. As you have probably heard, I was halted on the eve of my last expedition by the sudden spread of war to this country. Now I am preparing to sail south again. But I don't see how you can help me. Very simple, Captain Featherstone. I need pilots. Unfortunately, the war has disposed of most of them. I'm lucky to contact one such as yourself." And it was as simple as that. But Garin didn't really believe that it was more than a dream until they touched the glacial shores of the polar continent some months later. "Tomorrow," the leader glanced from face to face, "we start inland. Here." On a map spread before him, he indicated a line marked in purple. 10 years ago, I was a member of the Verdane expedition. Once, when flying due south, our plane was caught by some freakish air current and drawn off its course. When we were totally off our map, we saw in the distance a thick bluish haze. It seemed to rise in a straight line from the ice plain to the sky. Unfortunately, our fuel was low, and we dared not risk a closer investigation, so we fought our way back to the base. Verdane, however, had little interest in our report, and we did not investigate it. 3 years ago, that Katak expedition, hunting oil deposits by the order of the dictator, reported seeing the same haze. This time, we are going to explore it. "Why," Garin asked curiously, "are you so eager to penetrate this haze? I gather that's what we're here to do." Farson hesitated before answering. "It has often been suggested that beneath the ice sheeting of this continent may be hidden mineral wealth. I believe that the haze is caused by some form of volcanic activity and perhaps a break in the crust." Garin frowned at the map. He wasn't so sure about that explanation, but Farson was paying the bills. The flyer shrugged away his uneasiness. Much could be forgiven a man who allowed one to eat regularly again. 4 days later, they set out. Hemley, one of the engineers, Ralston, a pilot, and Farson occupied the first plane. The other engineer and pilot were in the second, and Garin, with the extra supplies, was alone in the third. He was content to be alone as they took off across the blue-white waste. His ship, because of its load, was loggy, so he did not attempt to follow the other two into the higher lane. They were in communication by radio, and Garin, as he snapped on his earphones, remembered something Farson had said that morning. The haze affects radio. On our trip near it, the static was very bad. Almost, with a laugh, like speech in some foreign tongue. As they roared over the ice, Garin wondered if it might have been speech, from perhaps a secret enemy expedition, such as the Katak one. In his sealed cockpit, he did not feel the bite of the frost, and the ship rode smoothly. With a little sigh of content, he settled back against the cushions, keeping to the course set by the planes ahead and above him. Some 5 hours after they left the base, Garin caught sight of a dark shadow far ahead. At the same time, Farson's voice chattered in his earphones. "That's it. Set course straight ahead." As Farson's plane kept going, Garin throttled down. The actions of the first ship indicated trouble. What if that haze were a toxic gas? "Close up, Featherstone," barked Farson suddenly. He obediently drew ahead until they flew wing to wing. The haze was just before them, and now Garin could see movement in it. Oily, impenetrable billows. The motors bit into it. There was a clammy, foggy moisture on the windows. Abruptly, Garin sensed that he was no longer alone. Somewhere in the empty cabin behind him was another intelligence, a measuring power. He fought furiously against it, against the very idea of it. But after a long, terrifying moment, while it seemed to study him, it took control. His hands and feet still manipulated the ship, but it flew. On the ship hurtled through the thickening mist. He lost sight of Farson's plane, and though he was still fighting against the will which overrode his struggles grew weaker. Then came the order to dive into the dark heart of the purple mists. Down they whirled. Once, as the haze opened, Garin caught a glimpse of tortured gray rock seamed with yellow. Farson had been right. Here the ice crust was broken. Down and down. If his instruments were correct, the plane was below sea level now. The haze thinned and was gone. Below spread a plain cloaked in vivid green. Here and there reared clumps of what might be trees. He saw, too, the waters of a yellow stream. But there was something terrifyingly alien about that landscape. Even as he circled above it, Garin wrestled to break the grip of the will that had brought him there. There came a crackle of sound in his earphones, and at that moment the presence withdrew. The nose of the plane went up in obedience to his own desire. Frantically he climbed away from the green land. Again the haze absorbed him. He watched the moisture bead on the windows. Another 100 feet or so and he would be free of it, and that unbelievable world beneath. Then, with an ominous sputter, the port engine conked out. The plane lurched and slipped into a dive. Down it whirled again into the steady light of the green land. Trees came out of the ground, huge fern-like plants with crimson-scaled trunks. Toward a clump of these the plane swooped. Frantically, Garin fought the controls. The ship steadied. The dive became a fast glide. He looked for an open space to land. Then he felt the landing gear scrape some surface. Directly ahead loomed one of the fern trees. The plane sped toward the long fronds. There came a ripping crash, the splintering of metal and wood. The scarlet cloud gathering before Garin's eyes turned black. End of Chapter 1.